This is the story of how I survived with only $1 for 24 hours. This is not a joke. This is actually what happened to me when I was homeless. And there's no excuses for what I'm about to share with you. I get up before the sun comes up, and the first thing I do is search the area for food. I find some bread and some milk. It was then that I realized that it was gone. Be a very hard day because all the stores were closed. I continued to panhandle and look for food, but I was also looking for work. I wanted to get a job so that I could make enough money to get off the streets. I applied for several jobs, but I kept getting rejected. I get up before the sun comes up, and the first thing I do is search the area for food. I find some bread and some milk. It was then that I realized that it was gone. Be a very hard day because all the stores were closed. As I ate, I started thinking about my life. I couldn't believe how far I had fallen. I used to have everything, but now I was sitting on the ground eating free food. I needed to find a way to make money. Thought about panhandling, but I didn't want to do that. I opened up the bread I had gotten earlier and started eating it, but I had to try. I went inside and sat down. When the sun came up, I got out of the church and started walking. As I ate, I started thinking about my life. I couldn't believe how far I had fallen. I used to have everything, but now I was sitting on the ground eating free food. I was determined to get my life back on track. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was willing to do whatever it took. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I needed to find some food. I walked into a supermarket and started looking around. I couldn't believe it, but they had a section where they gave out free food. It was like they read my mind. I took some cereal and milk and walked out of the store. A kind woman approached me and asked if I needed anything. I told her I was homeless and didn't have anywhere to go. It was one of the hardest days of my life, but it was also one of the most humbling. I learned that no matter how bad things get, you should never give up. There's always hope for a better tomorrow. She told me that I could stay in the church overnight and that they would make sure I got some food. I appreciate all the support I get from you guys. Thanks for watching. I was so grateful. Couldn't believe that someone would be willing to help me, but she didn't hesitate. She showed me to a room where I could sleep and gave me a blanket. I didn't have any condiments or anything else, but it tasted like the best food I had ever eaten. I finished the bread and started walking around the park. I didn't have anywhere to go, but I didn't want to sleep in the park. I thought I could walk around until I got tired and then just lay down somewhere safe. It's not because I was too proud to do it, but because it just seemed like I was giving up. I wanted to get my life back together, and I knew panhandling wouldn't help me do that. That's when I had an idea. I went to a local business district and started cleaning up the sidewalks. I swept the leaves and picked up the trash. I didn't make any money, but I was able to get some food. A kind woman saw me working and gave me $1. I was so grateful. At that point, I would have done anything for food or money. I was determined to get my life back on track. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was willing to do whatever it took. I couldn't find anything to eat or drink, and it was one of the worst days of my life. I didn't care what kind of job it was, just needed to make some money. I went into a restaurant and asked if they needed any help. The manager looked at me like I was a dog and told me to get out. I felt humiliated, but I didn't give up. I kept trying to find a job, but no one would hire me. I was starting to lose hope again. But I knew I couldn't give up. So I kept trying. Eventually, I got a job working for a moving company. Wasn't much, but it was enough to get me off the streets. Couldn't find anything to eat or drink, and it was one of the worst days of my life. I saved up enough money to get a small apartment, and I was finally able to move out of the shelter system. But it also made me into the person I am today. It taught me that no matter how bad things get, you should never give up. There's always hope for a better tomorrow. I'm now in a much better place in my life. I'm in a loving relationship, and I have a great job, but I will never forget the lessons I learned while I was homeless. It was truly a life-changing experience. I still had a long way to go, but I was finally on the right path. With the help of a few kind people, I was able to get the treatment I needed for my mental health problems, and I started to feel like myself again. When I was homeless, I would do whatever it took to survive. And today, I am gone, show you just how far I would go to make it through the night. For those who don't know, I became homeless after being evicted from my home. I asked people for spare change, but most of them just ignored me. Some people even yelled at me to get away from them. I felt humiliated and worthless, but I had to keep going. I needed to survive. I walked into a grocery store and started looking around. I couldn't believe it. but they actually had a section where they gave out free food. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep me alive. I took some apples and bread and walked out of the store. The reason they evicted me was because I had mental problems. I didn't have a job, and I was unable to care for myself. My situation really made me feel like a failure, especially since I used to have everything. I had a loving family, a great childhood, an amazing education, and I had friends. But unfortunately, life doesn't always go the way we want it to. And sometimes things can change in an instant. I started losing hope, and I thought to myself, maybe this is just a curse. Maybe I'm just destined to fail at life. Even though it was extremely painful for me to accept the fact that I was homeless, I knew that I couldn't keep feeling sorry for myself forever. So I decided to do something about it. I started by going out into the world and trying to find food and money. On the first day, I found a lot of food, and I was able to make it through the night without any problems. On the second day, I found less food, and it was a little bit harder to find somewhere to sleep. On the third day, I found almost nothing, and I had to start sleeping outside in the cold weather. As time went on, I became more and more desperate, and I started doing things that I never thought I would do. One of those things was panhandling. I never thought I would do this, but I had to do what I had to do to survive. Panhandling was difficult, and most people just ignored me when I asked them for money. But eventually I was able to get some money, and when I discovered a local soup kitchen. They gave me food, and I was able to make it through the day. As the days turned into weeks, I became stronger and more determined than ever to make it out of the streets. Now that I had a job, I could finally start thinking about getting my life back on track. It's been several years since I was homeless, and I can honestly say that it was one of the hardest things I've ever gone through. Today I'm going to show you how I survived with only $1 for 24 hours. I continued to walk around the city looking for food and money. I found a place to sit down and started eating. I started walking around the city again, this time looking for a job. As the day went on, I became more and more desperate. I went to a nearby park and sat down. I was exhausted and hungry. As I was walking, I saw a church. I didn't know if they would let me stay there. In the morning, they brought me some breakfast, and I was able to get some rest. I found a place to sit down and started eating. You're saying. So that's how I survived with just $1 for 24 hours. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe.